Welcome to the sixth part of Spring Boot with Kubernetes tutorial series. In this video, we are going to write our first integration test to test the endpoint of get bookmarks. Okay, we are going to use test containers for writing this test. So here we have this bookmark controller which exposes this one API endpoint to get the bookmarks. So we are going to write this test for this one. Okay, I'm going to create this. We are using JUnit 5, which Spring Boot by default provides. So here, if you take a look at this dependency, you have Spring Boot starter test, which automatically pulls JUnit 5 dependencies and a lot of other dependencies like JSON path and Mockito. So whatever the commonly used testing libraries, they are already added as part of this one as a transitive dependencies. And also while generating the application, we have selected test containers. So it already added this test containers JUnit Jupyter support for working with JUnit 5. And we have selected PostgreSQL, so it already added this PostgreSQL module dependency of test containers as well. And here we can see dependency management section contains this test containers BOM, so that you can specify what is the test containers version you want to use, so that you don't have to repeat the version for all these test containers library dependencies. Cool. Okay, so let me close all of these. And we have created this class, and for writing an integration test we need to use at Spring Boot test annotation. So this is for starting up your whole Spring Boot application, and then you will be able to test the components. Okay, and one thing that you would like to change is web environment. So here by specifying it's going to be random port, whether you want to run on a specific port or a random port. So usually it's a good idea to use random port, so that when you are running your tests in build pipeline like Jenkins or whatever the build server you are going to use, so it's going to pick a random port so that it won't conflict. Even if you are running multiple builds parallelly, it won't conflict. It will pick a randomly available port. So we are going to use this random port. And we are going to use a mock MVC object that is going to be provided by Spring Boot to fire our API call. So while using this at Spring Boot test, it's not going to auto configure this mock MVC. So what we can do, we can specify auto configure mock MVC. So with this annotation, you will be able to auto wire private mock MVC. Okay, so we can use this mock MVC to fire a API call. Okay, let us start with, we don't need void should get bookmarks. Okay, so here we're going to annotate with at test. Make sure that you selected JUnit Jupyter test annotation. Because it's, if you have both JUnit 4 and JUnit 5, maybe accidentally you may import JUnit 4's test annotation. So make sure you imported the right one. Okay, here what we can do, MVC dot perform, and here we can say mock request builder, mock MVC request builders dot our API is a get request, so we're going to use this get request, and the API is API slash bookmarks. We don't have to mention the page number, because if you don't mention, by default it's going to take it as 1. So what else we can do here, and expect, and the status. So we have mock MVC result matches status, that we are expecting it to be 200. Okay, so first let us start simply with this one. It's going to throw an exception, so let us just throw it. And also let me import it static. Okay, so here initially we are not verifying much. We are simply triggering this API call and then expecting the status code to be 200. Okay, so let us run this one. So here we can see in the log, it started the application, and the important point to note is here we are still not using any Postgres. It is still using default H2 in-memory database. Okay, we are not using Postgres yet. Okay, first let us implement additional features, additional test conditions. So when we are firing this API/bookmarks test, we are expecting the JSON to contain some data, right? So, and expect, what we can do, there is JSON path we can assert. Dollar represents the root of the JSON response dot. We are expecting total elements. Okay. There is core matchers dot equals to, and here we are expecting it to be 0. What is the error? Okay, cool. So what we are doing, we are asserting the status and then we are asserting this JSON total elements value to be 0. First let us run and then see. So the test failed. Why? Because when we assert the total number of elements to be 0, but actually it contains 12. Where do they come from? Because we have our database migration scripts, and we have this migration which inserts all these records. So it already contains 12 records. That's why it is giving 12 instead of 0. But to make our tests predictable, what we can do, before starting any test, let us remove all the existing tests, existing data, and then we can start fresh. So for that, let us auto wire bookmark repository. Okay, so here first let us delete all in batch. So here, before starting any test, we are simply deleting all the records and then we are running this test. Now we can see it should ideally return total elements as 0. Okay, let us run this. So now it is passing. But let us insert few records so that we can assert in a meaningful way. What we can do here, let us create a list of bookmarks. Okay, and here let us instantiate new array list. Okay, so here I am adding a bunch of bookmarks to this list, and finally I am going to use bookmark repository dot save all of this list bookmarks. Okay, so I am setting up some sample data so that I can do some meaningful test assertions. So here I am adding 15 bookmarks and I am saving them into the database. So here total elements should be 15, right? Let us run the test. Cool, it's passing. What else we can assert? we can assert total elements and total pages. So we have 15 elements and we are calling this API. So what we are expecting, by default the page size is 10, right? So we should get total number of pages to be 2. And what else? The current page should be 1, right? And what else we have? Is it the first page? Is it first? True. It should be true. Is it last? It should be false. Okay, and we have few more properties like has next. Yes, it should be true. And we have has previous. It should be false. So we are getting the first page, so there shouldn't be any previous page, and it should have next page because we have total 2 pages, and accordingly we have all these assertions. Let us run this one. So it is passing. So test is passing, but still, if you notice, we are still using H2 database. We are not using PostgreSQL, but finally we are going to run our application using Postgres database. So I want to test using the same type of database, running tests on a H2 database and then running against a different database in production. It's not a good practice. So let us use test containers library and spin up a Postgres instance. Okay. So I have already created a video on how to use integration testing with test containers. Okay, here I explained in a lot of ways how we can use test containers using different approaches. So if you are running, maybe if you are using database and some Kafka or some other RabbitMQ, so multiple containers, you can follow a different approach like the one I explained in this code. Here we can add this at test containers annotation, and you can define what container you want to use with at container annotation. So it will automatically takes care of spinning up this container, and you can use this container to get what is the JDBC URL, what is the username, password, and then override these properties. These are the properties that you configure to specify for Spring Framework which is the database you want to use and what are the credentials. So here we are dynamically overriding those values with this dynamically spinned up Postgres details. Okay, and then you can run the test. But there is a much simpler way for using Postgres container, I mean any database container with test containers. Actually, you don't even have to configure all of these things. Also, you can simply specifying a different JDBC URL. Spring Boot is able to understand that you want to use test containers, and if there is a Docker installed on the machine, it is going to automatically spin up the Postgres container. So here usually the JDBC URL would look like JDBC colon PostgreSQL colon host port and all this, but here by having this prefix of colon TC, it's an indication to say we want to use test containers. Okay, so let us simply override that and see what happens. So in our test, if we want to change any properties specifically for this test, what we can do, we can use this test property source and we can specify properties. So here I want to change the URL to spring.datasource.url equals to, I want to change to this format. Okay, so here I want to use 14-alpine. So this is nothing but the Docker image tag. This is we are specifying we want to use PostgreSQL. This is the Docker image of Postgres container, and database name, it doesn't matter, whatever you want to put you can put. So just by adding this one property, let's see what happens if we run the test. So this time you see it is spinning up this PostgreSQL container using test containers. It's going to pull this image from the Docker Hub, and then if you notice this, yeah, this database JDBC URL, it is not H2 in memory anymore. It is pointing to a PostgreSQL container, and the port number is a random one, and it is running schema migration scripts and then running the tests. Cool. See, just adding this one property, we are able to talk to a real database which we want to use in production. I mean, same type of database. Okay, and we are able to run all these tests. Cool. And again, I strongly suggest you to watch this video because there are different ways of using test containers, and depending on how complex your setup is, you may follow different approach, like the way we did here, using spinning up multiple containers. You can follow a different approach. Just because for our application we have only a database dependency, we simply followed this approach. Simply adding this is sufficient to spin up a Postgres container. But if you are using other containers, you may have to follow a different approach. Okay, cool. So here we just fired one API call with page number 1, and we are asserting. And how do we know that it is actually working for other scenarios? Right now we have total 2 pages, right? If we access page number 2, are we getting the right response? We don't know, right? So one approach is either you simply copy this and then create another test and then fire the same API with page number 2, and then you might have slightly different assertions, right? Another one, better approach would be using parameterized test. We are using JUnit 5, and JUnit 5 offers parameterized test. So let us try how we can use parameterized test. So here we are changing parameterized test, and here what I want to change, what I want to parameterize. So one thing is I want to pass page number. Okay, so for this one there are different ways you can pass the inputs. I'm going to use CSV source. So in this CSV source, there are a lot of ways you can pass values, but here I'm going to pass like this. So here first I want to pass page number. So here page number would be 1, and here what I can do, page equals to and page number. I would define it as int page number. So here when we run like this, it's going to run this test only once right now. What we can do here, 2. Okay, so let us see what happens now. Now the same test is going to run twice, one with this input and one with this input, and it's going to run with page number 1 and 2, and when it is 1, the test should pass, and when it is 2, it should fail because the current page would be 2, not 1, right? So let us run and see what happens. So here when page number equals to 1, all the assertions passed, but when page number is 2, it failed because some of the assertions are not valid for page number 2. So what we do, instead of fixing on these values, let us pass these values also as inputs, just like the way we did for page number, right? So when the page number is 1, the total elements we are expecting is also 15, and total number of pages is 2, and current page is 1, and is first true, and is last false, and has next true, and has previous false. And for case 2, when page number is 2, let us change this. So here same total number of elements would be 15 and total number of pages would be 2, but the current page would be true, and it would be like this. So is it first? No, it is the second page. Is it last? Yes, it is the last page. And has next? No, false. And has previous? True. Okay, so I have parameterized all this one. So what I can do now, here it's going to be total elements, and instead of hard coding is 15, I'm going to use total elements. And what else? Total pages. Int total pages. Here let us change it to total pages. And what is the current page? So I'm going to change this as well. Is first, boolean is first, change it to is first, and is last, going to change it to is last. Same for has next. Okay, and has previous. Cool. So here it's like when it is page 1, these are the expected outcomes for this response in JSON. Okay, let me run this test now. So here you can see when it is page 1 it is passed, and page number 2 it is passed. So our test is working fine. So let us take another look what we are doing here. So we are configuring this to use test containers database using this PostgreSQL 14-Alpine image. It's going to automatically spin up the container, and we are setting up some pre-cooked data here so that we can make assertions. So we have created 15 bookmark entities, and then we save it into the database here, and then we use this parameterized test and pass in some inputs and then make assertions. Okay, cool. So yeah, this is how we can test this endpoint. And if you are new to Spring Boot testing, I highly recommend you to watch this Spring Boot tips testing video, where I have explained how to write unit tests, how to write slice test and integration tests. Okay, so we have created this test, and then we have run this test from our IDE. But let us see how we can run this test from the command line. So we can go into this bookmarks API directory, and then here we can specify maven wrapper clean verify, and it's going to spin up Postgres container and then run the test just the way it ran when we run from IDE. So here we can see it created this Postgres and then run the tests. So this is how we can run all the tests. Okay, cool. So this is it for this video, and in the next video we are going to see how we can package our application as a Docker container, and then we are going to set up our build pipeline using GitHub Actions. Okay, cool. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the upcoming videos. Bye bye.